It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The kind of day where the sun peeks through the curtains just enough to warm your feet without blinding you. I was sipping my tea at the kitchen table, going through my little notebook. Yes, a real paper one, where I kept track of bills, pension statements, and a few handwritten recipes from my mother. Everything was in order, as always. I've never liked surprises, especially not when it came to finances. My son, David, walked in without knocking. That had become a habit ever since he and his wife moved to the same neighborhood. "Mom," he said with that casual tone of his, like he was asking what was for lunch, "we've been talking, and we think it's time you let us handle your finances." I blinked. Put my teacup down gently. "What do you mean, handle?" "You're getting older," he shrugged. "It's not a big deal. You know, things can get confusing. We just want to make sure everything's in place. Secure, efficient, and safe." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. "David, I've been managing my money longer than you've been alive." He gave me that condescending look, the one that somehow always reminded me of his father. The same subtle dismissal behind a smile. "That's exactly why we're worried. We don't want you to get scammed or forget something important." Behind him, I could hear his wife, Rachel, clicking away on her phone. She didn't even look up. "Power of attorney is pretty standard at your age," she said without inflection. "Most of our friends' parents already signed over access." There was no preamble, no warm-up, no gentle bridge to such a massive request. It was just thrown at me like a grocery list, something inevitable, even boring. But what I felt wasn't boredom. It was a subtle unraveling, like a thread being pulled from the inside. I tried to reason. "David, do you think I'm senile?" "No, of course not," he said quickly. "It's not about that. It's just proactive planning. You don't need to worry about bills or taxes anymore. We can simplify your accounts, combine them maybe, help optimize everything." It wasn't just about helping. It was about control. I could see it in his eyes, the faint gleam of entitlement, the assumption that he was next in line for the throne. But this wasn't some medieval kingdom. It was my life, my money, my independence. I stayed calm. I nodded like I was considering it. "That's a lot to think about," I said. "We can draw up the paperwork this week," Rachel chimed in. "My brother's a lawyer. He'll do it for free." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the old pipes breathe beneath the floorboards. I thought of all the nights I had stayed up rocking David when he had nightmares. All the years I worked late shifts and skipped meals to pay for his education. How I co-signed the mortgage for his first home when he was barely 24. Every time he said, "Thanks, Mom," I believed it was gratitude. But now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I drove to the lawyer's office. Not Rachel's brother. Mine. Mr. Carlton had been handling my estate since my husband passed 20 years ago. A steady, quiet man. The kind who never forgot a birthday or a decimal point. "I need to update my will," I told him. "And I want to make some changes to my financial power of attorney." He raised an eyebrow. "Anything I should be concerned about?" "Not yet," I said. "But I'd like to keep it that way." Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the slowly surrendering old woman. I let David believe he was winning. I asked him to help me with my online banking, pretended I forgot my PIN once or twice, told him I needed help reading a tax letter that I'd already read twice. He grew more confident, more careless. He started making suggestions about downsizing my home and freeing up unused assets. Rachel even suggested selling my jewelry collection to fund a family investment. That was when I knew I couldn't be silent anymore. I smiled and said, "Maybe you're right." But inside, I had already started rewriting the ending. So I smiled, and I let them believe I had surrendered. Over the next month, I began what I now think of as my little theater performance. I pretended to ask questions I already knew the answers to. I left my checkbook out by accident. I told Rachel I was confused by an insurance letter and handed her the envelope, knowing full well it was just a renewal notice for my car. David responded exactly how I expected. His tone shifted from cautious to commanding. I was no longer Mom. I was a liability. something to manage. An old woman who'd lived past her usefulness and needed guidance. And that's what hurt the most. Not the idea that they wanted control of my finances, but the way they spoke about me as if I weren't in the room. Like I was a problem, a nuisance, a ticking clock. Mom can't keep up with all this paperwork, David told Rachel one evening, thinking I'd gone to bed. I mean, it's not her fault. She's just not equipped anymore. You saw how she struggled with the bank login. I had heard enough. The next morning, I met with Mr. Carlton again. I told him, firmly, that I wanted a full rewrite of my estate plan. I wanted clarity, precision, and secrecy. No one was to know what I had done until after my death. He nodded. Professional as ever. You're the client. I'll follow your instructions to the letter. And I want to create a new trust, I said. One that bypasses David entirely. He won't get a cent unless he meets very specific conditions. And I want a clause for misuse of power or undue influence, just in case they try to challenge it. Understood, he said, scribbling notes. Anyone else you want to add? Yes, I said without hesitation. My granddaughter, Emma. Emma was 13 and had more empathy in her pinky finger than Rachel had shown in the entire 5 years she'd been part of this family. She was kind, curious, and had once brought me a hand-drawn card just because she heard I had the flu. I saw myself in her, before the world taught me to brace for betrayal. Back home, I kept up the act. I let them walk me through budget spreadsheets that I didn't need. Rachel even created a binder labeled Mom's Transition Plan. As if I were handing off a company, not my autonomy. They wanted signatures, authority, access. But all they got were smiles. Mom, David said one afternoon. We've scheduled a meeting with Brian, Rachel's brother, next Thursday. He'll get all the power of attorney forms ready. Oh, wonderful, I said sweetly. I do love having everything in writing. When Thursday came, I brought a tray of tea and biscuits into the living room, just like old times. Rachel was all business. David had a pen ready. The papers sat on the coffee table like bait, but I didn't take the pen. Instead, I picked up the folder and said, I'll take this to Mr. Carlton first. He's been my attorney for 20 years. I trust you both, of course, but it's always good to have a second set of eyes. Their faces twitched. Barely, but enough. Rachel tried to recover. Well, sure, but Brian's done this hundreds of times. He's family. And Carlton's mine, I said calmly. You don't mind, do you? They said no, but their eyes said yes. That was the moment the shift began. They started coming by less frequently. No more budget talks. No more spreadsheets. I suspect they knew deep down that something had changed. The truth came out 6 months later. I had passed on a small family cabin in the will, one they both assumed would go to David. Instead, I gave it to Emma, along with a generous trust. David received a single letter attached to a modest stipend that could only be used for his daughter's education. The letter read, You told me I was too old to manage my money, so I believed you. And I made sure someone else would manage it, fairly, wisely, and with love. Not control. Not entitlement. Just kindness. I handed that letter to Mr. Carlton, sealed in an envelope with David's name on it, to be delivered when I was gone. I never intended to explain it in person, because the truth is, some lessons are better taught through silence and a signature. The day I finalized the new documents, I walked out of Mr. Carlton's office with a strange sense of weightlessness. It wasn't joy exactly, more like relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I had reclaimed something I didn't even realize had been slipping away. Control. You see, I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who needed to defend her own independence. I raised David to be respectful, thoughtful. I taught him to say please and thank you, to call his grandmother on Sundays, to hold the door open for others. And for a while he was that boy. But somewhere along the way, he became a man who confused aging with weakness, and kindness with compliance. I didn't blame him entirely. The world does that to people. It whispers in your ear, tells you that money equals power, and that once someone grows old, they should be quietly shelved and managed. I'd seen it happen to friends. Women who built families from the ground up, only to be spoken over in their own kitchens by their adult children. I swore I wouldn't let that be me. Rachel didn't drop by unless she had Emma with her. And when they did come, the air was different, tense, clipped, like they were waiting for something. Maybe they thought I'd change my mind. Maybe they thought I'd slip. But I didn't. I cooked my own meals. I drove myself to appointments. I even joined a local book club, something I hadn't done since my husband passed. I bought a new journal and filled it with things I'd been too busy to remember. Quotes I loved, flowers I wanted to plant. Memories from when David was little and still looked at me like I was the son. Emma started calling more often. She'd ask questions no one else thought to ask. Grandma, what was your favorite job? What did you want to be when you were my age? One day she even asked, do you think grown-ups forget how to dream? It nearly broke me. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom just to cry in peace. But it also reaffirmed everything. She was the future of this family. Not Rachel with her spreadsheets. Not David with his inheritance calculations. Emma, with her open heart and soft questions, would carry forward what really mattered. Then came the event that set everything in motion. I had organized a small dinner for my 70th birthday. Nothing grand. Just a quiet meal at my house with a few close friends and family. I invited David and Rachel, of course, and Emma. I even invited my neighbor Susan, who'd become a dear friend since we started walking our dogs together in the mornings. The evening was lovely, until the cake came out. I was cutting slices when Rachel leaned over and whispered, "So, have you thought more about transferring the house?" I froze, knife in hand. "The house?" I repeated. "You know," she smiled, sipping her wine. "It would just make things easier, tax-wise. If it's already in David's name, there won't be complications later." That's when it clicked. They weren't done. They were just biding their time. Waiting for the moment when they thought I was weak again. Like a wolf watching its prey circle the herd. Limping just a little too long. I handed the knife to Emma. "Sweetheart, will you finish slicing this? I need to get something." I walked to my bedroom and came back holding a simple, ivory envelope. It had David's name on it in my handwriting. I placed it next to his plate. "What's this?" he asked. "It's for later," I said calmly. "When I'm gone." David chuckled. "Mom, come on, don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I said. "I just want to make sure everything's in place. Secure, efficient, and safe." I looked at Rachel when I said that last word. Her smile vanished. There was a long silence. Then Emma clapped her hands. "Can we do presents now?" And just like that, the moment passed. But I knew, they knew, that the power dynamic had shifted, and I wasn't giving it back. The days after that dinner were marked by a strange quiet. David didn't call. Rachel didn't stop by. Even Emma seemed unusually careful in her texts. Like she could sense that something had happened, something unspoken and electric, crackling just beneath the surface. I wasn't surprised. The envelope had unnerved them. That much was obvious. They'd expected an easy road paved by my declining years. Instead, they were met with a closed door and a sealed letter, both silent and deliberate. There's something unsettling about not knowing where you stand in someone's plans, especially when you thought you were at the center. I didn't chase them. I didn't explain myself. I watered my plants, cooked my meals, played my music. I started painting again. I even enrolled in an online class, Introduction to Digital Photography. I found joy in the small things. Watching clouds shift in the evening light, the perfect steeping time for tea, the way a room glows when you open all the curtains in the morning. I was living. Not winding down. Not waiting. Living. And that seemed to infuriate them. 2 weeks after the dinner, David showed up unannounced. He stood on the porch like a boy caught sneaking out after curfew. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat at the kitchen table while I poured 2 cups of tea. He didn't touch his. "Is there something you're not telling me?" he asked, eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "The envelope," he said slowly. "That letter. It's been bothering me." "It's supposed to," I said. "Mom, come on. You know we're not trying to hurt you. We just want what's best." For everyone. Everyone. I tilted my head. Or just you and Rachel? His face flushed. That's not fair. What's not fair? I said evenly. Is that you came into my house and told me I was too old to manage my own life. What's not fair is treating me like a relic while smiling through your teeth. You wanted control, David. But you forgot one thing. What's that? I raised you. I know exactly how you think. He didn't speak for a long while. Then finally he said, You changed your will, didn't you? I sipped my tea. I handled it. A muscle twitched in his jaw. How bad is it? I met his eyes. Depends who you are in the story. He stood up, his hands clenched. You're punishing me. No. I said, rising too. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. He opened his mouth to say more but thought better of it. He left without another word. I exhaled slowly once the door clicked shut. Not in fear, but in finality. That chapter, whatever it had been, was closed. He would never again see me as someone he could corner. That dynamic was shattered, and I had no intention of piecing it back together. A few days later, I received an email from Rachel. Subject: clarification on the house. It was clinical. Formal. She asked for clarity on property succession and whether any documents had been signed. She offered to assist in ensuring everything was legally compliant. She mentioned that it might be easier for everyone if we handled it now, while I was still coherent. Still coherent. That word sat on my tongue like poison. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Mr. Carlton and asked for a certified letter to be sent to both David and Rachel. In it, he included a brief statement. At the request of our client, Mrs. My Name. All matters regarding her financial and estate arrangements have been finalized and filed. No further inquiries will be acknowledged at this time. Any attempts to exert pressure or influence will be considered legally significant and may be documented accordingly. I felt no guilt. No second-guessing. Just clarity. Weeks passed. The silence resumed. I stopped checking my phone for their calls. I didn't need to. I had said what I needed to say, not with words but with action. Emma continued to visit. She came on Saturdays with her sketchbook and stories about school. I taught her how to make my mother's spring rolls and how to balance a checkbook. One day, while we were planting marigolds in the backyard, she asked, Grandma, do grown-ups ever get scared? I paused. All the time. Even you. I smiled. Especially me. But that doesn't mean I let anyone make decisions for me. She didn't answer, just nodded slowly, like she was filing that away for later. Good. That's exactly the kind of woman I wanted her to become. The seasons turned quietly after that. Autumn rolled in with crisp wind and golden light, and with it came a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. My days filled with the gentle rhythm of solitude. Walking in the park, journaling under soft lamps in the evening, and Emma's weekend visits that felt like the only real warmth left in the bloodline. David and Rachel didn't contact me again for months. At first, I assumed they were stewing, plotting, maybe waiting for me to soften or to slip up. But as time passed, I realized something more painful, more bitter. They had simply moved on. When they couldn't control me, they discarded me, like a piece of furniture too heavy to rearrange. But you know what? That was fine. No, it was better than fine. It was freedom. Because once you've been used, you stop fearing loneliness. You start choosing silence like armor. You stop questioning whether you're loved unconditionally, and start loving yourself for simply surviving all the years you weren't. That winter, I traveled. Not far, just enough. I visited an old college friend in Santa Fe, took an art workshop in Oregon, spent a weekend on the coast of Maine eating too much seafood and taking too many pictures of waves. I didn't post anything. I didn't share updates. I didn't call to check in. I let the distance grow. And in that distance, something inside me healed. I started working with a local nonprofit helping elderly women write their life stories. You'd be surprised how many women die with whole novels inside them. Whole betrayals. Whole victories. All silenced by politeness or fear of upsetting their families. But not me. Not anymore. One rainy March morning, I got a call from Emma. Her voice was shaking. Grandma. Do you have a few minutes? Of course, sweetheart. She hesitated. I need to ask you something. And you can say no. But could I come live with you for a while? I blinked. What's wrong? She exhaled, shaky and soft. It's been tense. At home. Dad and Mom. They argue about money all the time now. And sometimes it's about you. About me? Yeah, like. They think you did something unfair with the will. And they blame each other for losing control of the situation. Their words, not mine. I closed my eyes. This was the consequence I had anticipated, but hoped to spare her from. But the truth always ripples, no matter how careful you are. I can come get you tonight, I said simply. That night, Emma showed up with one suitcase, a backpack and her sketch pad. No dramatic goodbye. No angry parents on the porch. Just a quiet teenager with tired eyes and a heart that had seen too much for its age. I set up the guest room, made her favorite soup, and didn't ask too many questions. She stayed. Weeks turned into months. She flourished in the calm. Her drawings improved. Her appetite returned. She started smiling without flinching. And slowly, she began to tell me the whole story. David and Rachel had begun spiraling after they realized they'd been written out. Not just emotionally, but financially. The trust was airtight. The house legally protected. Even the jewelry and heirlooms were secured under specific clauses. There was nothing they could claw back. David took it personally. Rachel took it as failure. Together, they took it out on Emma. Not cruelly. Not openly. Just enough to poison the air. I think I was just an investment to them, she whispered one night as we folded laundry. Like, being your favorite meant I'd get more. And if they controlled me, they'd control you. I had no words. So I did what my mother used to do when I was hurt. I wrapped her in a blanket, made tea, and let her cry without questions. Because sometimes silence is louder than speeches. Sometimes presence is the only answer you can give. Spring arrived gently that year. The cherry trees bloomed early, and Emma and I made it a ritual to walk under them every Saturday morning, just the two of us. She called it our version of church. I liked that. It felt sacred in a quiet, unspoken way. At home, things settled into a rhythm that made me feel, dare I say it, young again. I cooked, she cleaned. I taught her how to sew on a button. She taught me how to use a digital art app on my tablet. We laughed. We bickered about movie choices. We healed. And yet, I could feel the tension creeping again. Like a fog around the edges of our peace. David had started calling. At first, it was once every few weeks. Then once a week. Then every other day. I didn't answer. I didn't block him either. I let the voicemails pile up. Long, rambling apologies sandwiched between vague justifications. Classic emotional math. Subtract the guilt, divide the blame, and hope I'd forget the sum of what he did. In one of the messages he said, I just don't understand why you turned your back on your own son. I almost laughed. Turned my back. No, sweetheart. I finally turned around and saw you clearly. But I said nothing. I owed him silence more than I owed him closure. Then came the letter. Not from David, but from a lawyer. Delivered by post, neatly folded. Sealed with the cold detachment only paperwork can deliver. Inside was a formal request. David wanted to challenge the will. Not the entire thing, just the trust allocation. He claimed it had been changed under duress, or during cognitive decline. He was calling me senile. Legally. Emma found me staring at the letter, holding it like it might burn through my hands. She asked quietly, What are you going to do? I smiled. Exactly what I planned for. Mr. Carlton was livid, in his own restrained way. The documents are flawless. The evaluations are current. We have video testimony of you signing everything, by your own suggestion, if you recall. I did recall. I'd insisted on a recording that day, just in case. Because when people smell money, they forget you once braided their hair and kissed their scraped knees. Carlton filed a response swiftly and thoroughly. Within 2 weeks, David withdrew the claim. No apology. No explanation. Just silence again. A coward's retreat. But the damage was done. Not to me, I'd long fortified myself against his schemes. But to Emma, she saw her father for what he was, fully and without filter. Not just selfish, not just entitled, but willing to attack his own mother's mental fitness to dig up money that wasn't his. I came into the living room one evening and found her sitting in the dark, holding a photograph. It was of David holding her the day she was born. I used to think he was a hero, she whispered. We all did, I said, sitting beside her. But heroes don't demand trust, they earn it. We sat in silence. Then gently she handed me the photo. Keep it. I don't want to forget what he looked like. But I don't want to keep pretending either. That summer, she turned 16. I threw her a small birthday party, just a few friends, a chocolate cake, and fairy lights in the backyard. We danced to 80s music and made mocktails with sparkling water and fruit. She laughed so hard she snorted. I looked at her and thought, this is the legacy I care about. Not the money. Not the will. Not the fight. This. A girl learning her own worth by watching a woman refuse to be erased. A few weeks later, I met with Mr. Carlton again and made a final change to my will, not out of revenge, but love. I added a letter to be read aloud at my funeral. Just one page. It said, to anyone who ever wondered why I made the choices I did, look at the faces of those I left behind. If they carry anger, perhaps they were never entitled to more. If they carry peace, they were my true inheritance. Emma helped me seal it in an envelope. She didn't ask what it said. She didn't need to. She already understood the language of boundaries and the quiet poetry of justice. He tried to threaten me. After receiving the will from my lawyer, David stormed into my house unannounced, red-faced and trembling, and demanded I reverse everything. This is ridiculous, he spat. You're making a huge mistake. You're not thinking straight. We're your family. I was calm. I didn't flinch. Then you should have treated me like one. He slammed a hand down on my kitchen table, rattling the teacups I had set out, politely mind you, and growled, you're senile. I'll contest this. I'll have you declared incompetent. I looked him in the eye and said, try it. My lawyer has every document, every record, every voicemail, every email and text. Go ahead, David. Make your case. I dare you. His bravado cracked then. He realized I wasn't afraid. I had nothing to lose, because they'd already taken everything they thought I valued. And that's the funny thing. I did value the money, yes. I worked hard for it. But what I valued more was dignity, and the power to decide what happens to my life, on my own terms. They tried to rob me of that. But now I had something they didn't expect. Leverage. The new will wasn't just an act of spite. It was my line in the sand. And they knew it. Word spread quickly through the family grapevine. Soon I started getting unexpected visits, soft knocks at my door, phone calls filled with trembling affection, gifts delivered with no sender's name. One day, Rachel even left a bouquet of white lilies and a card that read, sorry for everything. Can we talk? Talk. After everything? I set the flowers in a vase, smiled at them for a moment, then dropped them into the trash. Forgiveness might come one day, but not while their love came only when money was on the line. The real shift, however, came that Christmas. I held a small gathering. Just a few close friends, the neighbor I played cards with, and a lovely young couple I'd become close to. The ones who helped me with my garden last spring. The house was filled with laughter, music, warm food and stories shared without pretense. And then at around 7:30, there was a knock at the door. It was Rachel and David, standing together, shoulder to shoulder, like they used to when they were 5 and 7. Except now, both wore forced smiles and the nervous energy of people used to getting their way. Can we come in? Rachel asked. No, I said gently. You can come back when your visit isn't a transaction. I closed the door on them, and I felt nothing. No viternis. No pain. Just peace. Because I had chosen this. I wasn't being pushed or manipulated anymore. I was no longer their marionette with a wallet attached. I was just me, and that was enough. In the months that followed, I grew even stronger. I took up painting again. I volunteered at the community library. I started writing a memoir, Not for the world, but for myself. I wanted to remember that I had lived, that I had fought for my voice when others tried to silence it. And as for the inheritance, it's still going where I planned, to people who genuinely cared, to causes that make a difference, to those who helped me not because of what they thought I could give, but because they saw me, listened to me, respected me. As for my children, I still think of them sometimes. I wonder if they'll ever look back at that moment, the one where they said, "You're old. Let us handle your money now," and realize how much damage those few words did. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But I'm not waiting. I've already moved on. They say living well is the best revenge. Sometimes, a little direct justice doesn't hurt.